right, Gabe, I think we are now live for another weekly episode of Conversations with Cougars, and I want to welcome you, Gabe, to our weekly discussion. How you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm doing great, Bernard. Bernard, it's a weird time, but I think we're making the best of it.
I think we all are, and I appreciate you spending some time. I know that we're all in uncharted territory right now, particularly when it comes to college sports, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I know you've been on the phone just trying to do all the right things for your Auburn Tigers baseball team. So thank you for spending a few minutes with us tonight, going down some memory lane, some good times.
Absolutely, this is the best part of my day right here.
Very good. Well, there's going to be a bunch of folks rolling through, and I'll try and mention them as they come through. Some of whom will be your teammates, and others of whom you may or may not know. But we got Josh Andrews, David Mims, Don Truitt, and among others so far. So, guys, we're with Gabe Gross, who of course played for Northview in the late '90s for Judge Coach Kennard. Later
Yep.
and had a very good career in Major League Baseball. But Gabe, before we get to all of that good stuff, let's go back to the beginning, to your middle school, your junior high years. Did
Oof.
you grow up? Were you in Dothan all during that time? Because I certainly remember your dad, as most of us did, being a football star himself. But talk
Yep.
to us a little bit about that experience, growing up with your dad playing ball, and I know you had a brother who also played at North.
Yep.
Let's get into some family life for a little bit.
Yeah, I was in Dothan. I left Dothan just for a couple of years. I think second and third grade, and then we came back. And so I was in Dothan, definitely in middle school. The Northview connection started with my brother. He was 3 years older than I was. Really played on, to me, one of, at least for foreseeable after I left, one of the last really good Northview teams was my freshman year and his senior year. They got beat by Anniston in the state semifinals. Had Carice Davis at running back, Brandon Kelly as the quarterback. Of course, my brother was playing defensive end. Sean McCorkle was a big player on that team. Had a lot of really good defensive players. Eddie Grimsley at linebacker and Kerry Lee was a defensive tackle. And just it's amazing how names come back to you when you start thinking about it. But really good football team. Followed that team. Obviously, my brother playing on it all the way to the semifinals. Anderson wound up winning the state championship that year. And it was a game in the semifinals that Northview could have won. It was a last drive type of game. I think Northview was making a drive and got a penalty that put them behind the chains and really probably cost them that last drive. But so Northview was in my blood a long time. Grew up in Dothan Parks and Rec and Doug II Center playing baseball. My dad wouldn't let me play football till I was in middle school, though. So my first football experience was at Honeysuckle Middle School, which I'm told I don't think is even a middle school anymore.
For you guys in Dothan, I'm not sure what it is at this point. Y'all put in the comment section, what do they use honeysuckle for? And Gabe, I want to welcome Jason Mullins, Coach David Ryan, Will Garner, Camille Price, Paul Dunseth, David Mitchell. There's a bunch of folks, Kevin Christ and Eric Easley, all a bunch of years of Cougars. So thank you guys for spending some time with me. So
Coach Ryan, man, I say hey to Coach, man. I hadn't run across him in a long time.
Well, that's what makes this so fun. These weekly discussions. You never know that with over 40 years of Northview football tradition, you never know who's going to pop in for a few minutes
Yep.
and say hello and put a smile on your face. Gabe, when you played at Honeysuckle, were you playing quarterback or did they have you at different positions?
Started quarterback and safety. Actually went out the first tryout, I guess. I went out for quarterback and middle linebacker. And mothers being what they are, and my dad was helping coach. And she walked out about the fourth or fifth day of practice to watch practice. And I was playing linebacker in a scrimmage and made a tackle. And I heard her call my dad's name. And he walked over to her. And about 5 minutes later, he said, "Gabe, go to safety." And I never played linebacker again. And so I started out a little bit on defense, but shortly just it winnowed down to quarterback, and early in my Northview career, which I was no good at, I was a long snapper. After about the third one, I sent over our in a JV game, sent over the punter's head. That kind of wound my long snapping career up.
Well, that honeysuckle time period, we'll call it mother's intuition. She knew. She knew where
Yeah.
you were supposed to be playing. Well, during your ninth grade year, who were your coaches during your ninth grade football season?
Eugene Singletary
Hmm?
um, was our head coach, and I think that was the first year that Janaski Fleming may have come on board. I think he helped us out in the freshman side of things, and Coach Singletary used to call us sissy boys all the time, and kind of sing songs about us being sissy boys, and me and my brother still laugh about that every once in a while, and it was I remember we used to practice in the field kind of between 431 and Northview because the varsity obviously took the practice field, and I'll never forget my ninth grade year, us being out there, 4 days before school started or whatever it was, and he called us up for the first meeting. We all gathered around, took a knee, and he said, "Guys, make sure," he said, "there's ant beds everywhere out here. Make sure you don't sit in the ant bed." And I thought, what idiot would sit down in the ant bed? And a minute later, my chin started burning, and I looked down, and my hole from knee to ankle was black with ants. I'd put my knee right down in the middle of an ant bed, and went to hollering, screaming, knocking ants off of me, and then walked into Northview for the first time with yellow pus coming all out of my leg from about 150 ant bites on it. So,
Yeah, well, welcome to high school there, Gabe.
yeah, like that's not
Coach
like that's not the most awkward year of your life anyway.
Yeah. Coach Singletary and his family lived right around the corner from me. I grew up on Selkirk, and he grew there. They were on Camelot, just 5 houses. So I love Coach Singletary, and
Yeah,
he had the best way of just turning a phrase and knowing the right thing to say and do, and just would get your attention. He was the best.
he was awesome.
Well, Gabe, let's talk about your ninth grade year. That varsity team was a special year. Your brother's senior year.
Yep.
Did you get? Were you on the sidelines for varsity games? Or were you up in the stands with your friends and teammates?
Yeah, I was up in the stands. Like I said, Brandon Kelly was a quarterback on that team. I know Rob Ellis, Richard Hudson was a backup quarterback. So they had three pretty good ones that were on the team, and I just watched it from the stands. I went and traveled all over the place with them everywhere they went. I couldn't. I was so enthralled with Northview, and especially my brother. I've always looked up to him. He's 3 years ahead of me, so he was just at the edge where we couldn't really be too much rivals because he was always so much bigger than I was. But that's, I credit him and my dad for a lot of my athletic achievements just because I was always trying to play with him and play with his friends and keep up with him and my dad as well. And so it pushed me a lot. But I wasn't on the sidelines. Loved watching. I know that I think the game before they got beat by Anniston, they beat Viger in a 3 or 4 overtime game that was tremendous. And Viger scored to tie or to get within one and was going to kick the field goal to tie, I think in the fourth overtime, might have been the third, and faked the extra point, tried to throw it in the corner of the end zone on a 2-point conversion, and it hit the kid right in the hands, and he dropped it, and we won.
Well, that is a very memorable game. I'm looking up the stats right now from that fall of '94. It was a 26-23 win in the third round versus
No, so
Tiger.
it was a field goal. It wasn't extra. It wasn't an extra point. They lined up to tie the game on a field goal.
The week before that, they beat the snot out of Baldwin County
Yep.
and handled Opelika pretty handily as
I think it was
well.
Opelika. That's right, in the first round. And I think
Yeah,
Doug Barfield, Auburn's old coach, was coaching, still coaching at Opelika at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
Josh Andrews said that Anniston watered the field down that day of the semifinal to slow down Northview's running attack. I wouldn't
Wow.
be surprised.
It would not be. No, because Carice could really run. I think he had 1,700 yards from scrimmage that year. He was maybe not the fastest running back, but you couldn't hem him up in a phone booth. He just could cut and wiggle his way out of anything and had enough speed, obviously, to do what he needed to do.
Well, Miss Shirley C. said to tell you good evening, and Sissy Carol Reynolds says good evening and War Eagle to you, Gabe.
Oh, absolutely. Good evening, and War Eagle.
Very good. Well, guys, I'm talking with Gabe Gross, of course, played in the late 90s for Billy Kennard and then went on to Auburn and into pro baseball. We've been talking, Gabe, for a minute um, about your time on the football experience as a ninth grader. Let's talk also a little bit about baseball now. Who was your ninth grade baseball coach? Because I don't want to skip any of the baseball part.
As crazy as this is, I think Coach Singletary coached me in ninth grade baseball as well. I think he did both. In fact, I'm almost positive of that he was our ninth grade baseball coach. Ninth grade, we had the kind of Desert Storm, brownish gray total bottoms and top uniforms. They weren't white. They were just Desert Storm with a little garnet and gold wrapped around them, and that was about it.
Well, that's my brother David graduated, I think in spring of '94 or spring of '93.
Yeah.
And he played baseball, and they had those same uniforms still. He never liked them. He just thought they were a weird combination of colors.
That is exactly my thoughts on them. That would have been about the time that I got there. They would have been handed down to the freshmen at that point.
That's right. That's right.
They didn't look good on man or beast.
Well, talk to us a little bit about your experience as a ninth grade football player. Did you play quarterback? Did they move you around? Did you guys win any games? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I played quarterback. We were my 8th grade year at Honeysuckle. We went 0-6. We didn't win a game. We could score a few points. Didn't have much of a defense, and I think it was either the second or third game of the year. We went to Eufaula and beat Eufaula in a 9th grade game, and that was the first game that group of guys that we had won in over a year and a half. And that was a big deal to all of us. That was a really big deal. We hadn't won a football game in a while and went up there and beat them. I want to say we played 7 games, and we either went 4-3 or 3-4 in there. I know we didn't beat Dothan High School. Dothan High beat us because when we beat them my senior year, that was the first time any of that group had ever beaten Dothan High. And so that was a big deal.
Going into 9th grade, was it still back then Honeysuckle and Girard fed mainly into Northview and the other 2 schools into Dothan? So you had a lot of your Honeysuckle teammates came over to Northview, and then there was the Girard guys. Did you know any of the Girard guys just playing rec ball from any other sports?
Yeah, a few. In fact, from the baseball side of things, a lot of the guys, my rec that I played, I said was Doug 2, and most of those guys, Doug 2 sitting right next to Dothan High School. I don't know how I was zoned to play rec there and go to Northview, but I was. And of course, we had moved at some point in time, but I still played rec at Doug 2. But so most of my baseball teammates had been my enemies growing up, if you will. We played city championship. Chris Pruitt and those guys. Chris seemed like he would always win the Westgate side of things, and we would win the Doug 2 side of things, and we'd wind up meeting up there and also playing them in All-Stars. But we never played together until we got to Northview. And most of the guys I played baseball with wound up going to Dothan High School. And so I was a little split there for a little while because a lot of my friends went to Dothan, and yet I went to Northview with a lot of guys I'd been competing against.
Right.
Of course, Honeysuckle changed that. Honeysuckle changed that a little bit getting there because that did feed into Northview. But most of those guys that came from Girard were guys that I had grown up competing against and not with. But when we got together, especially on the baseball side of things, we had a pretty good club.
Well, here's a couple of names from the past. Josh Parrish says to tell you hello. Northview was the best, he said. Jamie Green says hello, and War Eagle. Coach Jerry Andrews, Gregory King. We got a bunch of folks rolling in, Gabe, saying hello to you.
Gabe, hey, everybody.
Let's take it to your sophomore year, heading into the fall camp. You're now moving up from the freshman. We're talking about football. You're heading into the sophomore year. And what are your chances of competing and getting to play a little bit on either the JV side or the varsity side at quarterback at this point?
Yeah, I think Brandon Kelly and Richard Hudson were the 2 senior quarterbacks, and Rob Ellis backed them up as a sophomore my freshman year. And so both Brandon and Richard graduated. They were both seniors, and that left really me and Rob. I don't really know if we had a third string quarterback my sophomore year. I know we must have had one, but I don't think we did. I had not yet hit really the growth spurt that was coming at that point. I think I entered my sophomore year. I was 5'10", weighed about 160 pounds. Obviously competing, but it was Rob Ellis's job to kind of inherit, if you will. And so, the biggest thing I remember was my first spring training, varsity spring training. And again, that was we made the playoffs, but didn't have a great year that year. But there were some really talented players. Like I said, Sean McCorkle, who everybody remembers if you have anything to do with Northview High School. Maybe still Sean is a top 5 overall athlete of anybody I played with in my career. He was just a tremendous athlete. He was a senior. Eddie Grimsley, linebacker, was a senior. Again, I think I've already mentioned some of these names, but especially defensively, Kerry Lee at defensive tackle, S.B. Letcher at linebacker, Tony Gabelson at linebacker. A lot of really, really good players, really good names. But I ran a reverse in spring training and pitched the ball, and of course faked the bootleg around, and then I become the lead blocker, and I hit whatever corner there was out there, and Russell Morris had the ball, and he cut up just inside my butt. And Sean had come from the free safety position and hit Russell as he cut. And I heard the impact right behind my helmet. And I was at the 10-yard line. And when I looked back, they stopped sliding on the goal line. And I thought to myself, my Lord in heaven, what have I gotten myself into?
Welcome to the big time.
Yeah.
Welcome to the big time.
God. That kid might actually hit me sometime.
Yeah.
But
and for those of you who didn't know Sean, he went on to Florida State after his senior year, and anybody who was an athlete, if you were looked at by Florida State, that's a big compliment. Of course, Lawrence Delsey went there, Marquez White from Northview went there, and maybe a couple of others may have walked on. But go ahead, Gabe. That's your spring of your sophomore year, going into your freshman year, but before you went to sophomore year.
Yeah, and I'd watched him, the year before. He loved for a pop pass to be thrown. He read that so well, and he just tried to decapitate tight ends. He probably would have been thrown out of most games these days, as most defensive players would have been before the targeting rule. But Sean was such a tremendous athlete. I'll never forget, running 7-on-7s, and when you snap the ball, just looking like everybody was in fast forward instead of running in normal motion. Just the speed of the game picks up so much, and I learned so much that year. Got to play a little bit in some blowouts. First snaps I ever took was in Opelika. In fact, David Ryan, on this, listening to this, I'll never forget. We were beating Opelika. We were going to get the ball back, and they told me to go warm up, and so I started throwing the ball. And there's a minute 3 left in the game, and he looked at me throwing. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "They told me to go warm up." And he said, "And you think you're going to pass?" You don't need to warm your arm up, Gabe. Just make sure you don't trip and fall down, and you'll be all right. Of course, I handed the ball off three times in the game. So.
Enthusiasm's got to count for something, right?
Oh, it does. I was locked in. I think that was the second game of the year, and was so excited to trot on the field for the first time. And like I said, played a couple more times in some blowouts, threw a couple passes at some point that year, and played JV. And I don't really the biggest thing I remember about junior varsity was I was a long snapper and I was terrible at it, and snapped a couple over our punter's head, but I was the only person that could throw it between his legs. And my dad, being the football player and playing at Auburn NFL, that's what he did. He was a center and a long snapper, and you'd have thought his son might have inherited some of that, but I did not. And snapping on field goals. Remember some games in Enterprise. I threw Jason Hester a touchdown pass at Enterprise. We had talked earlier in the season about how bad he wanted to catch a touchdown pass this year, and I think I didn't throw many that year, but I threw that one to Jason and just played some really, really, really fun games. That may be your funnest year if you're getting to play a little bit, because you got 2 game days. You don't just have one. You play on the JV, and then you play varsity. So you got 2 times a week you get to suit it up and to play a little bit.
Now, were those games still on Thursday nights? They were back in my day.
Yep, still on Thursday nights. That's the first time I really remember. I think like we would have had to have played Enterprise my freshman year, but I don't really remember it. I remember the game against Enterprise JV. Of course, it was in the stadium that's no longer what they use now. And I remember playing them in varsity that year. We beat Enterprise 2-0, and maybe the most boring high school football game ever.
Wow.
My sophomore year, they snapped the ball over their punter's head out of the back of the end zone, and we got a safety, and we beat them 2-0 that year. Beat Enterprise.
Now, when you saw that play, how did that make you feel internally? Not just because we got 2 points.
uh, uh, Thankful that it wasn't me, and proud that there was somebody else.
Done that.
Yeah. Hey, we may have lost 30 yards a couple times, but I never snapped it out of the back of the end zone. See, that's how your mind can play with you right there. At least I didn't do that.
That's funny. That's funny. Well, Gabe, we got some more folks rolling in. Carolyn, Hanahan Glover, Coach Randy Hicks, Philip Braswell, CeCe Dixon, and Coach Andrews said that, the JV back then played on Monday night. Sorry, Coach, your memory's better than ours.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we might have now that he says that.
Who was at that time? Coach Kennard was the varsity coach. Who
Yep.
was the offensive coordinator or the backs coach? Who was your coach at that point on the varsity level?
Coach Andrews, if you're there, he might have still been the quarterback coach. He was the quarterback coach right up around in there. I know that Coach Perry came in my junior year. I can't remember who if it was still Coach Andrews. I can't remember who would have coached quarterbacks my sophomore year. My mind's gone to Coach
Andrews.
Perry.
Coach Andrews was the quarterback and backs coach in my day.
Yeah.
But I'm a good bit older than you. Coach Hicks has got a little funny dig on you. Hold on. He loves seeing how the person you've grown up to be now is a blessing. When Bo was playing baseball, you wouldn't watch. You'd rather go fishing.
Oh my gosh. You know what? I told that if you got time, I imagine we do, since we're just telling stories, but they played a game at Opp, and there was a lake right across from the field, and the dam had broken on the lake, and there wasn't much water in it. And at that point in time in my life, I took a fishing pole wherever I went. I figured you just never knew. And we pulled up, and I'd never been there before, and I saw that lake, and it was just like gold. And so, yeah, I didn't watch that game. And I went over and started fishing, and I caught one because the dam broke. It was just a little pool of water, and all the fish that were in the lake were just in that pool of water. And I was catching fish hand over fist, and I caught probably about a 4 or 5 pound bass. And I had to drag him through about 10 feet of mud to get him to where dry ground was, where I was standing, and went to throw him back in after I'd unhook him, and he flopped right as I went to throw him that 10 feet, and he flopped in the mud. And my bleeding heart got the better of me, and I couldn't just leave him in the mud, so I took my socks and shoes off and waded about ankle deep, got him, and went to throw him, and he flopped again, and had to wade off in there about knee deep, and then finally got him back in the water. And of course, we're in Opp.
Right
and I'm
territory.
Yeah, but from the knees through my feet, I am nothing but mud, and had to walk back across to the baseball field. Of course, when we didn't win the game, everybody was so mad they couldn't see straight. And I think Eddie Wilkins was the center fielder on that team, and lots of other people. They had a good baseball team that year as well. And yeah, my parents were not happy at all because I had to ride home with 2 legs covered in mud, and they lost the baseball game.
Well, one, a man does have his priorities. And 2,
Yes.
I would say that karma probably caught up with you that night. But well, Gabe, let's take it past your sophomore year. Let's go into your junior year, and you're competing. Have you hit your growth spurt at this point, headed into your junior year?
I did. I weighed in, I think I said 5'10", 160 pounds as a sophomore, and weighed in at 6'2" and about 185 pounds as a junior. So I grew about 4 inches and put on 25 pounds, and really got to the point where it was feasible that I could compete really at a varsity level.
Well, going into that fall camp, your junior year, what were things looking like for the team and for you personally playing some ball?
Yeah, we lost a lot. We lost a lot of on that defense, especially. There were a lot of really good seniors on the defense as a sophomore, but we still had a decent amount. decent amount of players off of it. Matt Barfield, who wound up signing at Alabama, was on the offensive line. Played right guard, was our best lineman. Rob Ellis had played the year before. He and I kind of locked into a quarterback competition. It's really spring training, and then into the fall. One that right up until the week of game day, we were still taking equal reps, and then I finally, Coach Kennard told me that last week, told us that, instead of doing 2 reps and 2 reps, I would do 3 reps and Rob would do 2, which was a kind of code for, I think we're going to go with Gabe deal. And, it was interesting. I don't think anybody really knew what to expect, except that we had lost a lot, but we still had a decent amount of talent around, and we did. The biggest, I think, guy that stepped up that year was Derek Knight, who was our tailback. He was my age, was junior, senior year, but stepped up, had a really, really nice year as a tailback.
Were y'all running the ball more, or had you started to throw some?
No, if you know Coach Kennard, we were not going to throw the ball if we could run the ball. That was, he was the old believer that when you throw the ball, 3 things happen and 2 of them are bad. And we were running the eye. We had put in a little bit because I could run it a little bit. We'd put in a little bit of option in there, and that came from Coach Perry as well. I think Coach Perry brought that concept in because he really taught me footwork and how to run the veer out of the I formation. Really just a triple option look out of the I formation. So we ran that a little bit. We threw it when we had to, but we didn't throw it much. And that was kind of really even most of my senior year, that was really the story. We didn't really quite have, Dothan High had really, really good teams my junior and senior year. In fact, they had an undefeated regular season my junior year and had an undefeated regular season going my senior year until we beat them the last game of the year. And so that was really tough. Enterprise was good. Ozark back then was in our area, and they were terrible. And
they were bad for many years all through that time period. I don't want to skip ahead, but I did want to. I'm looking at some of the scores from your junior and senior year, and like your senior year, you guys blew out Bainbridge to start the season. Yep. You beat some teams pretty handsome, some good shutouts. Sidney Lanier. Inslee 42-0. Carroll you beat, but lost a tough one to Enterprise.
Yeah, that was really tough.
But then beat Dothan High to end that regular season. Were you playing basketball also during this time, during most of your high school?
Yeah, absolutely. Basketball, still to this day, I don't want to say I wasn't passionate about baseball, but my athletic gifts lined up more in baseball than did any other sport. I was so passionate about football, loved the game of football. But if you just told me pick one thing that you want to go play just for enjoying it, basketball might have been it. I love to play basketball. Basketball was so much fun to me and actually played a role in me finally getting a scholarship offer to Auburn. Rick Trickett came and watched me play a basketball game after a football season was over with and had not offered me, and offered me shortly after that. And so, in fact, offered me in the parking lot after the game. And talking with him later on that watching me play played a small role in really turning the tide that they were going to quit recruiting me and actually offer me. But I love basketball.
Gabe, I've heard many times that for skill position players for other sports, football, baseball, whatever, for those who play basketball, a lot of times the college recruiters, and I'm going to ask you this from your position now as being a college coach, that coaches love to watch footwork. And the best place to watch a kid's footwork and positioning is on the basketball court because you're transitioning so much up and down that court. I didn't know if that's ever been part of your criteria or if you've ever used that to evaluate athletes, but I'm wondering if that was used in your situation.
I'm sure it to a certain degree it is. I love watching it, and I love guys that I recruit who play basketball because, number one, you play a ton of man-to-man, which means you look a man in the eye, and he's either going to beat you or you're going to beat him. And it's the competitive nature of it. But you use the thing, I think, in today's nomenclature, and I don't know how far back it goes, but we evaluate twitch a lot. Is a guy a quick twitch, muscle guy, his footwork, how does his feet move. And if you're a basketball player, there's a really high chance, especially if you're decent, that you have quick twitch muscles. And you can see that really, really well on the basketball court. You can see the explosiveness of, can he jump? Can he rebound? Can he go up in a layup? Can he dunk a basketball? Can he play defense? Because if you can play defense, you got good footwork. And so a lot of that gets evaluated off a basketball court, and you can really tell the better athletes are usually going to go the farthest. And it's hard to be a bad athlete and be a good basketball player.
Well, I've certainly proved that when after my ninth grade year, Coach Johnson and Coach Tribb both sat me down and said they really thought that I should rest between football and baseball seasons because I didn't need to be overworked. That's how good a basketball player I was, Gabe, back in the day. But I want to welcome some more folks that have rolled in. Stephen Collins and Alana Andrews Gray are now watching us. Thank you, guys. I'm catching up with Gabe Gross, of course. We're headed into your senior year, Gabe. Let's stay. We're still at Northview. You're headed into the fall of your senior year. You guys were 6-4 your junior year. Billy Kennard is your coach, still Coach Kennard.
Yep.
And you guys got some good expectations coming into that year. And I've already mentioned some of the games, including the blowout against Bainbridge that first game. So talk to me your mindset going into your senior year. Did you know at that point, that fall, let's say July, August, and getting into the season, what sport you wanted to play in college? Had you thought about that enough to narrow it down?
I really knew, I shouldn't say I knew. I knew I wanted to try to play baseball and football. I feel like if I'd have stopped playing everything and just concentrated on basketball, I might have been good enough to go to a smaller school and play basketball. But it would have taken that. It would have taken me spending all my time on the court. But I felt like I was good enough to play baseball and football. Or at least I wanted the opportunity to find out. Auburn baseball had offered me that summer. I had a scholarship offer to Auburn. Told them at the time that I wanted to try to play both sports, and I needed to see if Auburn football was going to offer. I'd had a couple small, I shouldn't say small, I would say UAB had offered me in football. Joe Pate, who was from around the Wiregrass, recruited Alabama for whatever school he was coaching for. Had coached at Arkansas, and Arkansas had offered me, and then I think it was Danny Ford got fired, and so he left Arkansas and wound up going to NC State. And when he got to NC State, he offered me from NC State. And so, the Arkansas offer kind of went away, but he offered me from NC State. So I had a couple offers in football, but not from Auburn. But I had the baseball offer from Auburn. And oddly enough, that was the only.
Who was the coach? Who was the head coach for baseball at that time? Was it still Coach Baird?
Yeah, Hal Baird. Hal Baird was my head baseball coach, and when I got there, he was the coach for 2 years, and then Steve Renfro was my coach, my head coach my junior year, and so that's kind of all weighing in my brain as we started fall camp. I felt like we would have a chance to be pretty good in football, and actually that team was to me better than the 6-4 record. We lost a game or two we really shouldn't have lost, and had it been any type of really fair way of making the playoffs, I think we should have made the playoffs at the end of the year. Dothan was 2-1. Enterprise was 2-1. We were 2-1. Ozark, everybody beat Ozark, and we're all sitting there tied, and about whatever it was, the third or fourth tiebreaker down, I don't know what it was, we lost, and so we didn't go to the playoffs, and having the same record as the other two schools in our area. Enterprise beat us. We beat Dothan. Dothan beat Enterprise, and so. Anyway, that it was we had a wide receiver who was so good. Tarsus Thomas was his name, and I think I only had 12 or 1,300 yards passing, and I think over 50% of that was to him. It was kind of find Tarsus wherever he is on the field, and Derek Knight for the most part was at the running back position. Cornelius Bennett, really, really good player at the safety position. Luke Live Oak playing linebacker. I'm just trying to think of different guys. Kevin Dorsey, who I think is the commissioner now in Dothan, or was at some point, was a defensive end and a really good player. Robert Newby, offensive lineman, offensive tackle, played some college football. And we had a pretty good team, and in my opinion, probably should have been a 7 or 8 win team instead of a 6 win team.
Well, Gabe, I want to welcome Coach Janansky Fleming to watching us, and Michelle Armstrong Andrews is also with us. So thank you guys for tuning in. Obviously, talking with Gabe Gross. Well, Gabe, I know that your senior year of football didn't end up the way that you wanted it to, but you played basketball your senior year, and how did that season go, and then transition into your spring baseball season?
Well, before we leave football, let me just say my senior year Dothan game was, and still is. My wife kind of gets on me a little bit about it, going back to my glory days, if you will, in high school. But of all the games I played at Auburn and throughout my professional major league career, I would rank it in the probably the top 3 to 5 sporting events that I ever took the field in, of what it meant to me personally. Like I said, we as far as football is concerned, have not beaten Dothan. I didn't really like too many people from Dothan High, and for the most part, they didn't like me either at that point. And they were 9-0, number 2 in the state. We were 5-4, and like I said, we were a better team than 5-4, but we were 5-4, and you are what you are. And we wound up beating them. Played the game we could have been playing all year long, but definitely the best game we played that year. Threw a 91-yard touchdown pass with under, I think, 2 minutes to go in the game. Tarsus Thomas caught it and then outraced his cousin, Chris Gibson, who was a really, really good defensive back from Dothan High, to the end zone, and wound up winning that game. And I'll never forget, because we knew going in, if Ozark didn't upset Enterprise, we weren't gonna make the playoffs. And just the feeling and sense of completeness that I felt, and really as our team felt after that game. I remember we didn't make any noise stretching before the game. Everybody was just kind of locked into what they were doing. That was on purpose. No clapping. We didn't hit our pads. We didn't do anything. We're just sitting there stretching. To this date, I don't know that I've ever been in a locker room where you could look across and looking guys in the eye and know that everybody in that locker room wanted that as bad as you did, and was going to lay everything out there for it. It was a really, really unique game for me, and one that, when I go into my reward someday, that I'll always treasure having participated in. Not only participated in, but won. It was really big.
And that really says a lot about not only the rivalry, but the childhood memories that we all have from playing at that time in our lives, and such an important sporting event to ourselves personally, and our family and our community.
Yeah.
You went on and played, had a successful college career, both baseball and football. You played, close to 10 years or so in the Major League Baseball, including in the World Series. And you're putting that game, that memory, which still is very vivid in your mind, as one of the top ones of your sports memories. I mean, that just says a lot. What an impression. That's just awesome. And by the way, the 91-yarder may still be the longest, and I think you beat mine, which was 87 yards. But but I think that may still be the longest in Northview history.
Well, it was, it was weird. It was one of those deals that I took an intentional grounding penalty. We ran a middle screen, which is one of the best plays we ran. Just got the ball to Tarsus in space and let him do his thing. And boy, as soon as we snapped the ball and that started to develop, I heard every player on Dothan's defense start screaming, screen, screen, screen. And they took it away from us. And I was trying to get away, and they caught me, and I threw it out in front of Tarsus, which it was not intentional grounding. It's still, don't get me talking about referees, but the referee standing right behind me, looking at the play, did not throw the flag. The referee that Tarsus was closest to where the ball hit did not throw the flag. The referee standing 10 yards on the other side of me threw the flag over my head 30 yards, and it hit the ground, and it was like 2nd and 24 on our own 9-yard line, and we called a little twist route, and Tarsus was going to line up on the inside and go to the outside, and I usually didn't throw him the ball on that route. Usually it was the guy twisting to the middle that was open. And I looked at him in the huddle and said, I'm going to throw the ball to you. It's coming. And the play design, he was going to be on the right side. I took 3 steps to my left and turned, and I didn't really even bother looking at the defense. I was just going to throw it. Like I said, there was 2 minutes left in the game. I was just going to throw it at Tarsus, and threw it. And it was a good throw and just over the hands of the defender, and he caught it and ran the extra, whatever it was, 50 yards. For the touchdown. And Cornelius Bennett, like I said, corner in that game, ran down Dothan's running back. He was in the clear by 10 yards, and he ran him down and punched the ball out. And we recovered. Big fumble in the game as you can still watch the game tape, and Dothan High's fans, you can hear them going crazy, and then immediately they shut up, and Northview's side goes crazy as the ball pops out. Really, really big game, and it's always special when you're playing it with the guys that you've grown up with your whole life.
No, those are awesome memories, and Gabe, I appreciate you sharing. And we've got about 5 or 7 minutes. We'll be concluding, but thank you for sharing all those awesome memories. I want to get out of Northview and talk a little bit about Auburn and talk a little bit about your baseball career.
Okay.
You ultimately sign a football scholarship to play at Auburn, and who at that point I want to say was Coach Bowden. Was Terry Bowden the head
Yep.
coach at the time?
He was.
Talk to us a little bit about what your kind of a little bit your expectations about the baseball commitment versus the football commitment and how you dealt with that. Because ultimately, obviously, we all know you chose baseball, rightfully so, because you ended up being drafted in the first round by the Blue Jays a few years later.
Well, when I first went there, the final piece of the straw, Auburn offered me football, and like I said, after a basketball game, I think it was in early December. I went to a bowl practice. Damian Craig was a quarterback at Auburn. They won the SEC West, and then got beat by Tennessee and Peyton Manning in the championship game. And I went to a bowl practice, told Coach Bowden I really wanted to play both sports, and he didn't really know what to think about it at the time, and I hadn't committed yet. But he called Hal Baird. Those two kind of hashed it out. They both called me and said they were going to work with me to see that I got the opportunity to play both sports. They told me that. I shouldn't say that. They told me that on my official visit. And when I heard that, I committed. And then my freshman year, you go to college and you think you can play, but you don't really know. And of course, I came from a very, very simplified offense where we ran the ball the vast majority of the time at Northview. And into Coach Bowden and Jimbo Fisher, who was my quarterback coach. I think everybody knows where Jimbo is now, but it was like walking from 2 + 2 into advanced calculus. And 4 games into that year, I'm on the field as a starter, which was insane to me, and still is. It still is. But that's the reason why we were 3-8. We weren't very good.
Where was your first start?
My first start was in Starkville. I came in the second quarter against Tennessee, who wound up winning the national championship that year under T. Martin and Jamal Lewis and Raynock Thompson at linebacker, and just had a great, great team. But came in and played the 2/3 of that game at home. But the next week was Mississippi State, and that was my first start. And they were really good. They wound up going representing the West in the SEC championship that year. Got beat. It was 7-7 at half. And the thing I'd say mostly about my freshman year is we invented ways to lose games. I mean, it was really weird. When you're young, you're immature, you don't know how to win yet. Those are the things that happen to you. And then got through with that. Coach Bowden resigned in the middle of my freshman year because we were really bad. He thought he was going to get fired. He resigns. We hired Tommy Tuberville in the off season as I'm transitioning into baseball. And, the crazy thing that when I was in high school, people who got drafted were these mythical people that lived way off somewhere else in the Major League Baseball. And I still felt that way. And we played the first series of my freshman year, played it in Orlando. We played Georgia Tech, Virginia, and Maryland, and went 3-0. I was 4 for 10. And so I started out pretty good, hit a home run while I was down there. And Coach Baird called me in his office and said, Gabe, I just want you to know that I've been on the phone with scouts all day long who think that you might basically be a first-round draft pick in 3 years. And I thought to myself, what changed from me not getting drafted last year to all of a sudden in 7 months later I got a potential to be a first-round draft pick. That was really eye-opening and crazy to me. And really, when it came down to my sophomore year, where to picking a sport, which I'm not going to go into the details, but let's just say me playing 2 sports was not high on Coach Tuberville's list of things that he wanted to have happen. That my potential in baseball, and especially I hit really well, played really, really well my freshman year, was a freshman All-American, and I felt the opportunity to live out my dream of being a professional athlete was greatest in the game of baseball. And when it came down to it, that really drove that decision probably more than anything else.
Well, sure. I mean, not to get too deep in, like you said a second ago, but Coach Baird had Bo in the
Yep.
80s. He had Frank Thomas. They had both played both sports. So it wasn't a new concept to Coach Baird,
No.
but that was three coaches later for
Yeah.
you. But ultimately, it worked out a little bit for you. I know that you guys, your freshman year, let's see, you went to the Super Regionals and lost to Florida State
Yep.
your freshman year. Then you
That was
made the
tough.
regionals the next 2 years.
Yep.
But let's come forward now to draft day of your junior year that spring. Were you guys still playing baseball, or had the season just stopped, had just concluded for you guys?
Yeah. It had just concluded. Just concluded. The weirdness of how all this is televised now. I listened to the draft on a phone, and it was like we had a computer in the house, and me and my mom and dad were all three on different phones, and it was connected to somebody else. Excuse me, somebody else had a computer, and they put their phone up to the speaker of their computer and had
And
called
y'all are
us,
on
and
landlines.
we're
Everybody's
on
on landlines.
landlines. Absolutely, everybody on landlines. I was laying in my brother's waterbed back in his room, on the phone by his bed, and he wasn't there anymore. He was at TCU,
Uh-huh.
playing football at TCU, listening to the draft happen instead of watching it, or all these things happen. It was as nonchalant and not a big deal as anything you can imagine. And the Blue Jays told me literally the night before the draft, they tried to get me to agree to a pre-draft deal, which I turned down, which is still crazy to me to think that I turned down the 15th pick and the amount of money they were offering. But I turned it down. They said they were not going to draft me. My agent told me that he felt like they were bluffing. They would draft me, and they did with the 15th pick.
I was going to say, and clearly you called their bluff, but they got their man. But
They did, but I
Gabe,
got
I,
more than they
I
offered.
could
Too.
talk. I could talk to you for another hour, but I know we both got stuff to do, and I want to thank you for spending this hour with us and going down memory lane, sharing some awesome stories and mentioning so many players. Kevin Jackson just came in, Damon Glasgow just came in, and a few others. One of my teammates, Willie Banks. I'm sorry I missed you guys a minute ago, but Gabe, I'm gonna give you the last word before we conclude, my friend.
Well, I just speak to all those who tuned in, and it just Northview was such a special place to me, and obviously it is to everybody that's involved with this. You wouldn't be tuned into it. And man, the traditions that were built by those who came before me, and those who played after me, the teachers, the coaches helped to shape me in every really aspect I can think of, and how grateful I am that I got to be a part of Northview and the traditions, to play in a great rivalry like Northview and Dothan High, and to feel like you said, to still feel that strongly about a game I played in high school, when sports has been my life. 10 years professionally, football as well as baseball at Auburn, and now as a coach, and to have still games that I played in high school be that special to me, it speaks volume about um, how I feel about Northview and the people that were involved in it. And so thank you for doing this. Enjoyed it, loved it. For all those people that I know that signed on, I kind of miss everybody. And even though we don't really have an alma mater anymore, go Cougars.
That's right. Go Cougars. And Gabe, you certainly left your mark and your stamp on our program that we so dearly love. So thank you, my friend. You be well, be safe, and we'll catch you another time.
Awesome.
Guys,
Thank you, Bernard.
you're welcome. And guys, we'll catch you next week with another conversation with Cougars. And I think it may be Kevin Jackson next week. Kevin, you can tell me if we got the date right or not. We will talk to you guys another time. Be well.
Yeah.